So today we're going to be talking about knife lock types. And there are a lot of videos out there that you've probably seen about different lock types and which lock type is best and all these other things and all the debate and all the questions that people have about lock types and which is the strongest. I'm going to make a somewhat controversial video here, but I believe that there's some merit to it if you'll bear with me. My stance on all these different lock types is that the engineering of a lock type, how well it's made, is actually more important than the type of lock itself. Okay, I know that sounds crazy, but bear with me for a minute here. So, there's a lot of debate around the axis lock. Okay, this is a Benchmade Griptilian with some custom scales here. It's got an axis lock. I believe this is a very engineeringly sound, fundamentally sound lock design. However, you can make it well or you can make it poorly. Okay, the case in point here, this is a Ganzo knife. It's a cheap $20 Benchmade knockoff that I bought on Amazon. Okay, this is a good example of an actually well-made axis lock. Okay, you can see the tang is nice and thick. There's a lot of metal here attaching one half of the knife to the other. There's plenty of metal behind the axis lock. It slides smoothly. So this is a $20 knife with a very well-made, very strong locking mechanism. This is a SOG Vulcan. This is it's not an axis lock, it's their arc lock, which we all know is just an axis lock that uses a swing arm instead of a slider to get around the patent. Okay, so this is an example of a poorly made axis lock design. You can see that because of the position of the lock, the position of the pin, and the width of the handle, and some factors on the blade, that they've taken this tang down to almost nothing here. Okay, so this is a well engineered, if you will, lock type, but it's poorly executed in the engineering so that there's almost no metal holding the halves of this knife together. So this knife for $20 is going to be way stronger than this knife for whatever, $150 or whatever dollars this knife costs, because this lock just has a lot more metal attaching it to the knife than this lock. Okay, let's talk about lockbacks. Okay, same sort of deal here. This is a cold steel Tryout lock. It's a very, very strong lock. I'm sure you've all seen the videos on Cold Steel's website where they hang weights from the back of a Tryout lock, and it's extremely strong. And they are. This is a very well-designed lock back. It's got a stop pin in there to take the stresses. It's got some rounded edges on it so it doesn't split. Now, Blade HQ has a video out where they take a Spyderco lock back and they test it with a bunch of other knife types, and they test the locks to failure and they tell you how much they broke on. The Spyderco lock back they have splits in half at the blade junction. They say, oh, look how strong it was, the blade broke. It wasn't strong, it snapped in half. Okay, it broke, it failed, where the other locks just kind of bent and the knives didn't break. The locks failed, but the knife itself stayed intact. The Spyderco lockback, the blade literally snapped off, and this is why. Okay, Spyderco lockbacks, they use a very thin, narrow profile on the handle here. So you can see this is a 4-inch blade, and this is like less than half an inch of metal, and it's cut in half, so like a 1/4 inch of metal that's holding that entire 4-inch blade onto this handle, so no wonder it fails. The cold steel ones don't have that problem because this is a much better engineered lockback. So very different designs, although they're both lockbacks. This one is incredibly strong and this one is incredibly fragile. So it depends on the engineering. Another example of something that I believe is a great idea but poorly engineered is the Spyderco compression lock. Okay, so the only thing that's keeping this knife from folding back is a little tiny piece of steel that's very thin, the liner, and they narrow it this way so that it goes between the bar and the blade. So you got this little tiny chunk on there. if you watch the Blade HQ video, when they do a compression lock, that's what fails, is that little piece of steel that comes up in the back here and wedges between the bar and the blade. It just snaps off, okay? All Spyderco would have to do to make this an incredibly durable lock is just increase the thickness of this liner this way, just double it up, and this would be one of the strongest locks out there, but they don't. They make the liners very thin, and so those locks are prone to failure that way. Okay, great idea. Again, poor execution. A type of lock that gets a bad rap is the frame lock, okay? You'll see all kinds of horror stories on videos about these, how easily they fail. But again, there's more to it than that. Okay, this is a Kershaw Cryo. On the same Blade HQ video, they use this frame lock and they put it in their setup, and it takes something like 325 pounds off the back of the blade hanging, and this frame lock does not fail. Okay, this is an example of a well-designed, sturdy frame lock. There's a zero tolerance cold steel video out there that shows the same thing with a zero tolerance knife. It's a very well engineered frame lock, and it does not fail. This is an artisan cutlery. I think this is the waistline. This is an example of a poorly engineered frame lock. Okay, so this is a titanium frame lock, and you can see how thin that attachment on the handle is for that frame lock. There's just not a lot of metal there, and the metal that's there is very thin this way, okay? This frame lock has so little metal attaching it that, let me see if I can get this the right direction here, okay? When I go to push the flipper, you can actually see, can you see how that frame lock pushes away from the rest of the knife there? It's literally flexing this way and getting ready to break just from me pushing the flipper to flip the knife out. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you have this. This is a zero tolerance, what is this, 801 tie, okay? This is an extremely well engineered frame lock. You've got the steel insert here. This has a gigantic tang. So like from here all the way up to here and all the way from here to here, this is basically a solid piece of metal that big holding the knife together, okay? The frame lock on the bottom here, you can see that is a very thick, very wide this way piece of titanium. Whereas this was, is about that thick. This one's easily, 3 times the width and twice the thickness of the other one, and this is a very, very strong frame lock. In a cold steel video, a lock like this withstands something like 360 pounds on it the wrong way. It's not this exact model, but this is probably an even more durable model than they use in that video. So lots of different lock types, lots of debate about them, but be careful what you buy, because in my opinion, the way a lock is engineered, again, more important than the actual lock type.